Today I'd like to share with you how I created an image inspired by vintage Ziegfeld Follies and shot with a Canon EOS R5. Lindsay Adler here, and I've always been inspired by the Ziegfeld Follies. Now in these 1920s and 30s vintage revues, the women, they wore amazing costumes, had beautiful hair and makeup, incredible sets, and so I wanted to do a fashion shoot inspired by these performances. And so one of the costumes really stuck out to me in particular. It was the performer Hedy Lamarr, and she's wearing this big headpiece with all of these stars, and you've probably seen it, even if you don't realize that you have. So I reached out to my friend and designer Lory Sun, and I asked if she could create something for me to photograph in that style. And this is the look she came up with. And it is so beautiful because not only does it pay homage to that piece, but it also adds her own stylistic twist and gives it more of a modern flair. And so I want to take you behind the scenes and show you how I chose to light this image and also what was captured in camera versus post. This photograph was lit with two strobes. Now the first strobe, the main light, is a 10-degree grid on the subject's face. Now what that does is it basically lights her face and her torso. And so as you look at this photograph, anywhere that you see white light, that's what the 10-degree grid is illuminating. And a grid focuses the light. There are different size grids, so I could have chose a larger grid, a 20-degree grid, if I wanted more spread of white light. Or I could have chosen a smaller grid, a 5-degree grid, for example, if I wanted more concentration of light. And so once I had illuminated my subject, I actually decided I wanted to bring her closer to the background because the grid is a hard light, and when I brought her closer to the background, it cast a shadow on that white background. And I thought that the shadow really showed off some of the details of the headpiece. And then I wanted to control the shadows, which is where the second light comes into play. This is an extra large umbrella with diffusion. This is a soft light source, but far more important than the quality of light is actually the gel that I added to the light. I used a cyan gel. What that does is anywhere that wasn't hit by the grid, anywhere that there was a shadow, well, now that cyan gel will then fill in the shadows. And so you can see everywhere except for what was hit by the grid is now blue. So this creates depth and color and interest to the photograph. Let's also talk about the camera gear I used. For this shoot, I had the opportunity to use the Canon EOS R5. Now, what's beautiful about this camera is that it is a mix of all the things I'm comfortable with and love. It's a mix of my 5D Mark IV, it's a mix of my Canon EOS R. I get all the comfort and capabilities of the 5D IV, but I also get the benefits of a mirrorless camera. So for example, for this shot, I was using face and eye tracking, and so it was focusing on the eye closest to camera. So as she's posing and moving, I never had to worry about if I was locking focus. Also the camera, it has 100% coverage for autofocus, left to right, up and down. And so my subject, she could move and dance across the screen, and I never had to focus and recompose. I always knew that the eye closest to camera was going to be tack sharp. This is what the image looked like straight out of camera. Now, I like what the shot looks like out of camera, but I think there's a couple things that could be improved. For example, by using a grid as the main light, it got darker down the bottom of the frame, which means her legs got a little bit darker. And so I think the photo could be improved by lightening up the legs, maybe smoothing them out just a little bit. Now, believe it or not, this subject actually has an even tinier waist than what you're seeing in the photograph here. She is a professional burlesque performer. And so she has a very, very shapely form, and the way that this piece was falling on her didn't quite show her shape. It didn't cinch in the back, and so I decided to actually liquefy it in to look more accurate to her form. I also think that the warm tones of her skin and her cheeks aren't necessarily adding anything to the photograph, so I decided to pull out some of the reds and yellows in the skin, increase the contrast, and overall desaturate the photo. So this is the before shot, which also, it's a little bit crooked, so I ended up turning it just a little bit. So here's before and here's after. You'll also notice that I elongated the legs a bit. This is something that I often do, sometimes maybe because my camera angle was a little bit too high, but most of the time it's because the more I can elongate the form, the more powerful it appears and the more elegant it appears. And so that's what I did in this case. So here's before and after. You can see the color changes as well as the contrast and a bit of liquefy. Now my style is clean, bold, graphic, strong, and elegant, and I believe this photo shows all of those things. And so I was able to take inspiration from the past, one of my favorite places to be inspired, the Ziegfeld Follies, but add my own stylistic twist. If you'd like to see more photo deconstructions, learn more of my tips and tricks, learn more about lighting and post-processing, be sure to subscribe. See you next time.